This isn't for everyone, but Venice is slowly dying, and most people visiting have no idea. It looks like a dream. Perfect canals, historic buildings, postcard views everywhere. But behind that beauty, there's a hidden truth no one talks about. Because Venice isn't just crowded, it's collapsing. Overtourism, rising sea levels, and constant flooding are quietly pushing the city to its limits. And here's the part that feels almost unreal. The more people visit Venice, the faster it disappears. Millions of tourists walk those streets every year, taking photos of a place that may not exist the same way in the future. A city losing its people, its structure, and its identity. So this isn't just a travel story. It's a travel warning. Because once you see what's really happening in Venice, you might never look at it the same way again. Venice is becoming a city without residents. There's something quietly disappearing in Venice, and it's not what most people expect. It's not just about Venice sinking or rising sea levels, it's the people. Decades ago, the city had around 175,000 residents. Today, fewer than 50,000 remain. And that shift reveals a hidden truth. Venice is slowly turning into a place where people visit, but no longer truly live. What once felt like a living city is starting to resemble a carefully preserved stage, shaped more by mass tourism than by daily life. This change is deeply connected to overtourism. With up to 30 million visitors a year, the tourism crisis has transformed the local economy. Apartments become short-term rentals, small markets turn into souvenir shops, and everyday life becomes harder to sustain. Imagine trying to live in a place where everything around you is designed for tourists. That's the dark reality many locals face, and why so many are leaving. And when residents leave, something deeper disappears with them: culture. The habits, conversations, and routines that define a place begin to fade. What remains may still look beautiful, but it feels different. Almost like a tourist trap built on a lost culture. And this raises an important question. If Venice keeps losing its people, what will be left for the world to experience? Venice has become a tourist theme park. At first glance, Venice feels like a dream. Gondolas gliding through canals, historic buildings untouched by time, narrow streets full of charm. But beneath that beauty lies a growing tourism crisis that most visitors never stop to question. With up to 30 million people arriving every year, Venice is no longer just a city. It's becoming a global attraction shaped by mass tourism. And that shift changes everything about how the city functions. The problem isn't tourism itself, it's the scale. Venice was never designed to handle this volume of people. Its narrow streets, fragile infrastructure, and limited space create constant pressure. During peak days, tourists outnumber residents by a massive margin. This creates a strange imbalance where daily life becomes secondary. Restaurants adapt menus for visitors, stores replace essentials with souvenirs, and entire neighborhoods begin to feel like extensions of a curated experience. And here's where the hidden truth becomes harder to ignore. When a city starts existing primarily for visitors, it risks losing its authenticity. It may still look beautiful, but it begins to feel staged. Almost like a living museum. A place you walk through, take pictures of, and leave behind. And if Venice is becoming more of a destination than a real city, what is that doing to its foundations? The city's structure is being worn down. What many people don't realize is that Venice isn't just overwhelmed, it's physically wearing out. Every step taken across its narrow streets and historic bridges adds pressure to a city that was never designed for modern mass tourism. The stone pavements, some centuries old, are slowly eroding under the weight of millions of footsteps each year. It's subtle, almost invisible day by day, but over time, the environmental damage becomes impossible to ignore. Venice was built on wooden foundations driven into soft lagoon soil, supporting structures that have survived for hundreds of years. But constant stress changes that balance. Think about it like this. Even the strongest material, if pushed beyond its limits every single day, begins to weaken. Add to that the vibration from boats, the movement of water traffic, and the sheer density of visitors, and you start to see how fragile the system really is. This isn't just about preservation, it's about survival. Because when the physical structure begins to fail, everything else follows. The beauty people come to admire depends entirely on these foundations holding together. And if they don't, then the question is no longer about tourism, but about how long Venice can actually endure what's happening to it. Venice is slowly sinking. Beneath all the beauty, there's a reality most people don't see. Venice is slowly sinking. Not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually, year after year. This process, known as subsidence, combined with rising sea levels driven by climate change, is creating a silent but relentless threat. It's the kind of danger that doesn't shock instantly, but accumulates over time. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Because by the time it becomes obvious, it may already be too late. The city rests on wooden foundations driven into soft sediment, which have held for centuries under stable conditions. But today, those conditions are changing. As sea levels rise and the ground beneath shifts, Venice sinking is no longer just a theory, it's a measurable reality. Even a few millimeters per year adds up. Imagine living in a house where the floor drops just a tiny bit every year. You might not notice at first, but eventually, everything starts to feel off. And this is where the concern deepens. Because sinking alone would already be a problem, but combined with something else, it becomes far more serious. When lower ground meets higher water, the result isn't gradual, it's disruptive. And in Venice, that disruption already has a name. One that's becoming more frequent every year. Flooding is becoming the new normal. There's a moment in Venice that surprises almost everyone, but for locals, it's no longer surprising at all. It's called acqua alta, and it used to be rare. Today, it's becoming part of everyday life. Venice flooding is happening more often, more intensely, and lasting longer than it did in the past. What was once an occasional inconvenience is now a recurring disruption, reshaping how the city functions and how people experience it. When these floods happen, it's not just water on the streets. Saltwater enters buildings, seeps into walls, and slowly damages structures from the inside out. Over time, this kind of environmental damage weakens foundations, erodes materials, and accelerates urban decay. Imagine dealing with flooding in your home several times a year, not just cleaning up water, but watching the structure itself deteriorate. That's the dark reality many residents face. And here's where it becomes even more concerning. These floods aren't isolated events, they're symptoms of a larger shift driven by climate change and rising sea levels. Each flood leaves a mark, and those marks accumulate. The question is no longer if Venice will flood again, but how often and how severe it will become. And that leads directly to the next point. Can anything actually stop this? Even the solutions may not be enough. At this point, it's natural to assume that solutions are already in place. And they are. The most ambitious one is the MOSE project, a massive system of mobile barriers designed to protect Venice from high tides. When water levels rise, these gates lift to block the sea from entering the lagoon. On paper, it sounds like the perfect defense. And in some cases, it has worked. But the reality is more complex, and far less reassuring than it seems. The MOSE project took decades to complete, faced corruption scandals, and cost billions. And even now, experts question its long-term effectiveness. Because while it can temporarily stop high tides, it doesn't solve the root causes: climate change, rising sea levels, and the ongoing environmental damage affecting the lagoon. It's like putting a barrier in front of a problem that keeps growing stronger. Eventually, the system itself may struggle to keep up. And this is where the future of Venice becomes uncertain. Because if the solutions are temporary, and the problems are accelerating, then time becomes the most critical factor. Venice isn't just one of many historic cities in danger, it's a global symbol of what happens when beauty, tourism, and environmental pressure collide. The question is no longer just how to protect Venice, but whether the world is ready to face what its disappearance would truly mean. So now you've seen it. Venice isn't just a beautiful destination, it's a warning sign. A city caught between overtourism, climate change, and its own survival. And the uncomfortable truth is, it's not the only one. There are other historic cities in danger, quietly following the same path. So now I want to ask you, Would you still visit Venice, knowing what's really happening behind the scenes? And if you enjoy discovering hidden truths, fascinating places, cultures, and stories that most people never stop to question, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because Inside Europe has a lot more to show you in the next videos.